this point about attribution and with and without and causality is really important. We've got 25 minutes or so before we finish. Shall we start with the designated discussants? Shall we turn over? Mike, where are you?
Yeah. Right, 3 minutes to just talk about practical application of these methodologies going forward. 3 minutes, 7 points, so let's see if we can do it. First thing about methodology. The methodology I want as a shopkeeper with 2,000 factories in my supply chain, 20,000 farms and 1.7 million workers in the supply chain. I need something that allows me to hotspot where I can make the most impact and development first. Before I dash in to working out what is my equivalent to Indonesia or Kenya, the brilliant case that we just heard, I need something up there that allows you to identify these are the 5 or 10 places that if Mark and Spencer intervene, you can make a huge difference. So I need that kind of methodology. Second is I need to get my suppliers, my buyers, to fundamentally buy into wanting to do this rather than driving them to do it or asking them to do it. Last time I was up, I shared 3 examples with you about working in Bangladesh to drive productivity in clothing factories, better for us, better for the worker, better for our buyers. I talked about cotton production, rather than just focusing on fair trade and organic, working with Better Cotton Initiative, to look at working in the field with the farmer, to reduce fertiliser and pesticide use, better for the environment, puts more money in the farmer's pocket. I don't have to pay a marketplace premium in addition. We talked about South Africa, where again our buyers wanted to intervene because they wanted a fundamentally better raspberry, fundamentally better flowers. They could only get it from South Africa, geographic conditions, but they had to intervene with the Shell Foundation to build the capacity to produce these products. Again, it's in our interest to do it. Point 2. Point 3, piloting and rollout. We've done a lot of work with eco-factories, eco-dye houses, now these ethical model factories in Bangladesh, to learn quickly in 3 or 4 pilot facilities, targeting work, learn in 3 months, roll out across the rest of the supply chain. Fourthly, local capacity building. Again, it's all very well us making our brains ache in here. I need to work with suppliers right around the world to build the capacity in those places to make this happen. I don't own assets in the way that a Unilever does or an Anglo American do. I work with suppliers. I've got to find a way for my supplier exchange to raise best practice and learning in between them. Fifthly, shared approach. I can't turn up to a shared factory that Nike uses, Walmart uses, other retailers and say, how to do my methodology, my assessment, and they ask for something totally different. Ultimately, like the ETI and the SEDEX model, there's going to have to be a shared approach to working on this. Penultimate point, trade-offs. Much as my brain aches trying to make this work, and this is the hardest part of Plan A for us to think through and deliver, there is another complexity coming down the line, and that's looking at social development and the trade-off with climate change. Whatever methodologies we develop, we've got to be able to have the capacity to say, that's the value of social development versus that's the impact on climate, and look at it across each other. And the final point, we have to measure better than we do now. We've gone from business indifference about social development to risk assessment, as we've seen with labour standards, to the groundbreaking work you've heard from the guys a little bit earlier, all about measurement. But ultimately, we're going to have to let go. True innovation will come from suppliers, from farmers thinking of their own solutions, from my buyers because they want to do it, not because I've put them in a rigid framework that says we do it like this. That's my 3 minutes up. Thank you.
It's worth saying that your earlier presentation and the report of the meeting is on the website, I hope. Is it, Caroline? Yep. Very good. Graham.
Well, I guess I'd just like to say that not all businesses have always been indifferent about moving things onwards and development, but certainly we find ourselves in a strange position today. About 18 months ago, I was given the chalice, not quite sure yet whether it's poisoned or not, of measuring the impact of our fair trade and ethical trade programmes. So we've got 30 years or so heritage and history of doing it, and then all of a sudden someone says to me, well, measure and prove why what you've been doing for so long is so good and is having an impact. And it's really not very easy, is it? So what we've heard tonight is some fantastic examples of people that have managed to do it. But my question is, what do I measure? I've got over 2,000 products, as Mike was saying, over 2,000 products, 2,500 stores. We've got over 30 or so relevant supply chains. Do I measure the impact of one of those supply chains in depth? Do I measure the impact of the effects that customers have when they buy our products? Or do I look at the claims that we make, and do I look at who we say we are as a business? So I'm not really sure that we've gone beyond proving, Caroline, you were saying earlier on. And for me, the question is, what's the business case? We know why we're involved in the business that we're in, and we believe it's right to make profit with principles. But when I come to actually proving it and making an assessment of our impact, where's the business case? How do I get to that? And I guess that's an open question, and also I'd like to get some of the views from the people that were up on the panel earlier on as to how they've made that case and how they've sold it in. You guys are on a much different scale to where we are, but it's certainly what we're struggling with today. Don't take the business case for granted.
License to operate, we heard. Cost saving, we heard.
Or all of the above.
Bottom of the pyramid selling.
Yeah. So, but when it's intrinsically linked into your brand, it's a complicated issue.
Not back to that, I think. Thank you very much, Jessica. Where are you?
I'm always amazed how excited people get about measurement. It's one of those things you say, measuring impact, and the room fills very quickly. So I'm not sure if I'm from the WBCSD, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and we've benefited a lot from all these different approaches. Over the last couple of years, we've been developing a framework ourselves to measure the impact of business on development, which, as I said, is quite a heated sentence, and I think you pointed out correctly that we're still not quite sure what we're really talking about. We're not quite sure when we're talking about development. We're not quite sure what we mean by impact. We're still not sure what quite we should really be measuring here. I think that we benefit from a lot of the work that's been done by a lot of the financial institutions, as well as the three companies who were here today, who experimented a lot for us and provided a lot of learnings and really helped the WBCSD. I just wanted to comment on some of the other things that were mentioned today, and I think the comparability issue is something that is really, really challenging. I think everyone is looking for the easy solution, the quick and dirty assessment framework, and I'm afraid that it's not out there. And I think it gets back to the business case that the reason companies are doing this is to learn, to improve, to make sure that their investments make sense, that they're actually putting the money in the right place, and that they're able to actually to evolve in a sense and understand their markets better. And I think, Vodafone is an example of how they're using it as a market study. I think it is extremely important. So, you find yourself at these forums and there's this indicator talk and everyone wants to find the perfect indicator, but I would propose maybe we have to come up with some kind of selection of indicators that companies can use, but they're not necessarily the end-all to be-all. We've tried over the last couple of years, as I said, to come up with the one-size-fits-all, and it doesn't exist. A few other things that I'd like to mention is just these direct and indirect impact. I think this is extremely important, and I think it's one of the reasons why we can't compare, but also one of the reasons why it's important that this collaborative space continues to exist, because as we understand, the companies have indirect impacts, and they are somewhat responsible for those impacts, but at a certain extent, that's also where they learn where other people can fill the gaps, where are the limits of what they can possibly do. And so I think that we have to keep that in mind and use that understanding and the measurement of indirect impacts to really be able to as a way to work together. And lastly, I think that the issue about climate change, I think, is extremely important. The space, we're constantly talking about the contribution to development, but we also have to keep in mind the issues, the environment that the companies are in, and also the negative impacts that sometimes the things that are out of their control that then the company must respond to. So not necessarily practical advice, but just some comments based on what we heard today, and I'm happy to tell you more about the framework.
Last time you were on, so to speak, WCSD, there was a CD. Is there still a CD? The method that you had was a CD,
yeah.
A book or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, we have the framework methodology, which is about 75 pages, and then we also have what we call an Excel user guide. But to be honest, it's hard to come up with a simple Excel sheet. That's what everyone wants. They want something simple, but how do you incorporate stakeholder views, perceptions, and things like that into that kind of framework? So any advice you have on that?
And will you post the details of your stuff also on the website?
Definitely.
Brilliant. Thank you all for being succinct. We've got a quarter of an hour. Are we getting somewhere, or are we stuck? There is no single solution. There is no magic bullet. It's really hard when it's embedded in the business. all these methodologies have things to offer. They're all complementary. They're not cheap. What are your takeaways from all of this? Those who are not already doing it, you're going to rush off and do it. Let's take half a dozen quick comments, please.